Vishal, before you speak, just let me say a few words. So it's a wonderful opportunity for all of us to come together on a platform that was laid down by Dr. Nanda Rajneesh and the entire team that has put up such a wonderful show. Vishal and I go a long way back together, and words are not enough to describe this magnificent personality. He is many things put into one. Vishal is a phenomenal surgeon. I know him since my very young days. And apart from being a thorough professional surgeon, he's also an entrepreneur, an intellect, and what was introduced of him is very little of what he truly is. So he's many, many things in one. So it's a privilege and honor for me to introduce you, Vishal, and to moderate this session. We look forward to some enthralling thoughts and ideas from you on your presentation. As usual, I've listened to so many of your presentations before, and this one I'm sure will be better than all of them.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for the kind words, Sampath. I'm scared this is going to be the boring one. Huh? No, but so Nanda had asked me to speak on preventing precancers and cancers of the oral cavity, and I'm trying to put this together in as many making as much sense as possible. So I'm representing HCG, and we were running this initiative on preventive programs, and I thought this was more apt for head and neck cancers. If you look at it today, we have about 30% of our country's cancers in head and neck. So we'll see about 10 lakh cases each year, and of which about 1/3 of them are head and neck cancers. Pardon me for all these graphic mistakes. You see, I have a Mac system and I got it converted into PPT. So now today, if you look at oral cancers in India, we have about almost 2 lakh of these new cases each year, and nearly 80,000 of these are oral cancers of head and neck. 2/3 of them involving the GP complex and the rest in the tongue. You look at the mortality, nothing much has changed. The 5-year survival remains to be at 20 to 50%, 140,000 deaths globally, and about 50,000 in India annually. And majority of them present in the late presentation. Now, these are old slides, and over the last 5 decades, my bosses have also presented the same slide. And we presented the same thing with no change, absolutely no change in survival, absolutely no change in any difference. And the problem remains the same. We have tobacco, alcohol, dietary factors, oral hygiene, and recently HPV, which have also been known as contributory factors. Now, all of us know that these are key important factors. There's nothing much to kind of elaborate about these. And if you look at the staging systems, as I told earlier, majority of our cancers are falling in this group, not in the first 2 groups. Question is, what could we do? Now, most places we have known that if you look at single modality treatment, it is for early stages, and multi-modality is for late stages. And we are all stuck with combined modality, which increases cost, increases length of stay, increases the overall morbidity, decreases the survival. Now, the question, I think, in prevention of oncology has been that we've all tried to shift from this to this, trying to see what can we do, and that's the only answer that we have found that improves survival. Nothing other than this that improves survival. So if you look at the dimensions of prevention, we have primary, secondary, tertiary. Primary talking about policy, tobacco control, prevention. Secondary talking about early detection, and tertiary talking about patient support group to look at surveillance, to look at better support systems. And these 3 complete the entire compass of it. Over the last 12 years, I've been a part of primary prevention, working with the WHO as one of the technical directors for non-communicable diseases with their non-communicable diseases program, and learned a lot about the interesting aspects of prevention policies, understanding the various dimensions to the failures of policies, and how the World Trade Organization seems to be more powerful than the World Health Organization. And the tobacco industry seems to be the controlling mode. So primary prevention is a very complex area. Today, the world's biggest superpowers are not able to. And I've been a part of Bloomberg's advisory And Bloomberg, when he was the mayor of New York, took up this task because one of his advisors asked him on where should I put my money into if I have to change the course of one disease. They asked him tobacco, and they said because this lobby cannot be handled. So Bloomberg single-handedly took it up to say that I'll fund world over funding on tobacco control. And it so happened that that evolved into this global program, and he's currently the United Nations ambassador. I acknowledge him as one of the world leaders who has actually taken the tobacco industry head on. Very few people could have had the capacity, the money, and the political stature to take this industry head on. Secondary prevention is where we are all focusing on in terms of early detection, and tertiary is what at hospital level we are able to do. Early detection is about understanding the science. So we go from normal epithelium, dysplasia, mild, to looking at squamous cell carcinoma. Now I know we all know it, but today the question has been, how can you pick this up at the subcellular level? Can you really look at secondary prevention by secondary prevention by trying to pick up the cancer early? So we've done some very interesting work in this area, and I'll maybe in the closing remarks talk about those. But the question has been, now this is stage 1 when squamous cell carcinoma, it can be stage 1 to stage 4, but the question has been, can you pick it up at stage 0, which is the pre-malignant condition? We just got a recent paper of ours accepted in one of the international journals, which talks about picking it up at stage -1. Now that will be the future of technology. Here is my dear friend. So we've all been working on early detection, and one of our papers was on looking at how do we pick up cancer at stage -1. So we actually brought about the aspects of quantum physics, we have aspect of quantum tunneling, looking at how quantum tunneling may play a role, and maybe biology has fooled the world for too long. Maybe the answers lies in physics. So I'm a part of this mathematical oncology group with Indian Institute of Science, where we've been working on models, understanding how to predict cancer at stage -1. And this is going to be the future of technologies. So this is where we are trying to understand genomics, metabolomics, proteomics, and that's going to be the future of technologies where we're going to be able to pick up cancers early. I think what we will all be interested in is going to be looking at, can we make a dent here? And that's where I think diagnostics, theranostics will all be directed towards, and hospitals would also be interested into this area. We often find these kind of pre-malignant lesions with tobacco history and other things. So I'm going to just touch upon the aspects of saying that prevention, we all know, is better than cure, and there are multiple factors that are contributing to cancers today. And I'm sure all the speakers have all spoken about diet, tobacco, we've talked about environment, we've talked about radiation exposure, stress. Tobacco tops the list. I mean, there cannot be a bigger list than tobacco. Tobacco contributes more than 50% of these cancers, 6,000 chemicals, 70 carcinogens. And alcohol and tobacco are great friends. So you see, the reason is because alcohol is a greater solvent. So it helps absorb the carcinogens better. And that's the reason you have a higher chance of getting cancer if you use tobacco. And both together lobbies work together. Often I've seen that in all of the committees, they come together. They work very closely with each other. And it's very difficult to touch them. I think if you look at the overall impact of tobacco per se, oral cancers, India tops the list. If you look at the list of all the diseases, I think oral cancer has been, unfortunately, we've been proud in India to go and tell everybody that we do the highest number of mandiblectomies, which I think is a pathetic story because the world laughs at you. Because, this is one such preventable cancer. And what you have done is, if in a cigarette smoking, the carcinogenesis period is 20 years, you have brought it down to 6 months in chewing tobacco. So zarda, khaini, pan masala, mawa, all kind of category of things are present over here. So, I keep thinking of this, and various times I brought this in this forum. This is the kind of tumors you deal with. And is it worth it? Is it worth these young gentlemen going through the entire approach where people like this is a gentleman I had treated some time back from Kundapur, did an extensive lab, 12 hours, went, spend your time, and then after that you come to see in 6 months he has distant metastasis, expires. What is the what is the overall benefit you have done? What is the point in having an Ayushman Bharat scheme or a Vajpayee Aragyashri scheme and telling that fellow that we are going to give you this treatment? Is the fundamental question we need to ask. And I remember we were asked to do a presentation in the assembly in Karnataka. And in this presentation, I asked our Honorable CM this question. I said, sir, May 22nd, 2010, can you guess how many people died? In Mangalore, in Kudla, how many people died? About 167 died. So the question was, I asked our CM, sir, if every morning you wake up in the newspaper and the headlines read that one plane crash happened, will you suggest that I build another hospital close by? Business opportunities, so many patients are there everywhere. Or will you say, no, we'll have to rethink into is it the engine or is it the tarmac? I asked them, I said, this is what is happening in Karnataka every day. Giving an example, saying that nearly 200 people every day die of tobacco in Karnataka. Nearly. Which is equivalent to one plane crash. And I asked him, rethink your policies, rethink on what we're doing. And I tell them, look, our bread and butter is tobacco. You see, surgeons' bread and butter today, oncology is tobacco, 50% to 70%. I'm asking you, I said, boss, rethink on this. What is it that we can do to do this? And we gave them Karnataka statistics to our CM and to our health minister, saying 2 crore consumers, 66 lakh of them will die a premature death. This is Karnataka statistics. And the financial burden on it, 4,000 crores on health spend each year, heart diseases, cancer, lung diseases, and conservative estimate for about 3 diseases caused. So now you look at, I'm going to flip through these into the quest. But the simplest thing in prevention, which I think Shankar Narayan showed, which I thought was one of the most impressive ones, was he did a cluster randomized control trial on 2 lakh patients, 1 lakh patients on this side and another 1 lakh patients on the other side. It's called as a cluster randomized control trial, where he showed that a very simple thing. He had one group. I'm telling you all how simple clinical trials in India can be done. He showed that on one group, they made healthcare workers, not doctors, not nurses. Healthcare workers do clinical examination of a patient, asking him to open his mouth. And on the other side, they asked him to do health education. That means only talk to them about ill effects of tobacco, be careful, talk to them about white patch, red patch, but no examination. And he showed that in the group that had both of them for the entire population versus the group that did this, there was no difference in mortality. So he was wanting to know a little deeper. So in the subset that he analyzed, he took a specific subset of high-risk individuals. He showed that there was a significant difference in mortality if this group, that is the high-risk group, were to be given a visual examination by a healthcare worker just by asking him to open his mouth. Think of it, how simple it is, not complicated to do one new gadget or to do a new technique, but simply ask the person to open his mouth and ask a healthcare worker to ask him to open his mouth. If you find something suspicious, and all they were trained also 15 minutes to say, okay, if white is there and red is there, it's abnormal. And that's what they did. And they showed that they could save lakhs of lives by just simply asking them to open their mouth at very, very minimal cost. Now, this is the kind of solution the world needs. He is now heading the WHO preventive programs for the world. And such an inspiration. Sometime back, I met him and I was telling him, what a simple clinical trial. I mean, can't we think of something as simple as this? 2 lakh people. Is there a shortage for people in India? No. A simple methodology. They used one pipeline that crossed 2 groups of villages and said 1 lakh people here and 1 lakh people here across one pipeline, and said this is a cluster randomized control trial. The word may sound very complex, but cluster randomized control trial was this. There were so many villages, so it was a cluster on one side of the pipeline versus the other. And they did such a phenomenal thing that changed the way the world looked at everything. Every single guidelines from Cochrane to Lancet changed because of this single trial. And that's the difference it made to us. Instead of doing a mandibulectomy, you would just simply do a local excision and you would prevent more cancers. So while you have today a lot of technologies like fluorescence, infrared, Raman spectroscopy, contact endoscopy, I'm working with a lot of these experts. It simply showed that if you open your mouth, you'll be able to do better results. That's all. And that's something we still have not implemented well, although we know the answer. So we've been a part of several media awareness campaigns with the government on this. And I believe this is going to be the new phase of the Marlboro Man if we don't intervene. We'll build more hospitals. So we have something called as Karnataka for No Tobacco, a NOT program with the WHO and various other experts coming together. Karnataka is been at the forefront of the litigations we have. I don't know if you'll, but I've been an intervener in 2 cases, one in the Supreme Court and one in the High Court myself. So I've got enough of threats on the tobacco industry, interacted with them. And as an intervener in various of these cases, I used to interact with farmers, look at aspects, gone to the courts to look at how the tobacco industry, there was one of the very classic litigations. I remember the Supreme Court designated it to the Karnataka High Court on pack warnings. And there were a battery of about 20 lawyers on this side. And there were 3-4 lawyers on our side from the WHO side who were standing and fighting the case. And we used to wonder how are we going to fight this case, but we did win it. And it was monumental victories that we've had in Karnataka on several litigations that we've done against the tobacco industry. And the last one I remember was the assembly going on, and the tobacco industry, one of the top men coming and telling me, why don't you just shut up and sit down? And don't. But the point was that despite all the power and money they had, when an oncologist stood up and spoke, people respected it. I felt it is just that we don't speak. So we made a little small difference in our own way, So I do these little small programs with Bosco Street Children and several other programs where we actually take care of the children. You see, these children eat tobacco because they feel hungry. It's not about addiction, it's about killing hunger for them. So they actually do these habits because they feel that because of socialization and others. I'm just going to skip this. So these are some of the programs we've now initiated on helping people quit tobacco. And I'm going to close with this one contribution we've recently done. With University of Chicago, we jointly, actually, I showed in the first slide, from pre-malignant to malignant. And every time you have to prove cancer, you have to do a biopsy. This is the first time in the world we've shown that without a biopsy, just with your saliva, we can actually prove it's cancer to an accuracy of nearly 90%. This was a moonshot study. I remember when we started this about 4 years back with the U Chicago, that we were both not sure whether we'll be able to succeed in this, but we both said we'll take this up. Tata Trust funded us. It was a very complex task because till now genetics cannot diagnose cancer. Genetics can prognosticate, genetics can do some therapeutic direction, but never diagnose cancers in most instances. This was the first time we were able to show that with saliva, you can actually, with a set of 12 genes, diagnose cancers. And we are now working with ICMR to see whether we'll be able to make this affordable. This is right now beyond the reach of, but hopefully in the coming days, we should be able to do something logically with this. And this has now been published in one of the very high index journals. So I think I'll stop with this. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Vishal. Phenomenal presentation as usual. You've stimulated a lot of thoughts in all our minds, and I know your fight against tobacco, and you've been doing this for a long time, along with several of your colleagues as medical and surgical oncologists, right from your Tata days. And thanks to you, directly, indirectly, your fight against tobacco has definitely saved a lot of lives, and I think we should all appreciate that effort from the speaker. And I think if there's one message that we need to take home today, apart from diet modifications, lifestyle modifications, the one thing that we as surgeons see, where bodies get mutilated, where the face gets mutilated due to all the kind of surgeries that we do, the advanced surgeries, it's quite heroic, quite, I would say, adrenaline pumping for us as surgeons. But at the end of the day, that it's still a scar on the face. And there are a lot of people out there. It may not be so obvious to the public here, but we in the hospital see a lot of patients who undergo these mutilating surgeries. And of late, we also saw mucormycosis. That was one more disease that caused a lot of facial mutilation. And a lot of these are in young patients. So the one way we can avoid this situation is to rein in tobacco consumption, the tobacco industry. And I find it abominable that superstars, so-called big stars, do these surrogate ads for tobacco, for the tobacco industry. I think we should grow up as a nation, make sure that the message from speakers like Vishal is taken across, and do our bit to educate people around us and make sure that we wish away tobacco out of our lives. So it's a single most important contributor to all the cancer surgeries that are happening in the hospitals. Thank you, Vishal. I can take a few questions. I'm sure there'll be somebody in the audience. Yes, sure, please.
As I completely agree, he's like a phenomenal, Bharata Ratna, I would say, literally, what Dr. Vishal has contributed.
On his way, he's on his way.
On his way,
What's the
literally,
space?
hats off. And I would request Dr. Vishal to talk about this other innovation to make people speak. And I think it's like amazing. Just 2 minutes maybe for people who's watching on the Zoom also, it'll be excellent.
Innovation, I realized, was a difficult task in India. But when I went on to the journey, I wanted to invent the voice prosthesis, because most of the times I used to see these poor patients and I used to feel that they can't afford it. So the journey has been complex from the time, and I think you've been a part of many of these journeys. For me, the most interesting thing in a nutshell is, I think, identifying the problem and saying that, yes, I want to work on it. Inventing the voice machine, or the voice prosthesis, when everybody tells you that it can't be done, to then getting a patent granted for it, which I think was the next leap of possibility for me, because now I have 18 patents. But earlier, when I started with one, I used to think that this is, now I have drugs, now I have expanded into vaccines, now I've gone into many large patents, which I keep doing. But it's been a very interesting journey to look at it and then understanding how to implement it. So at one point, regulatory hurdles, financial hurdles. So today, I think I've gifted that patent to Government of India. And I am now hoping that they will be able to take it forward, because the investments were so huge that I realized that I'll have to leave all this and I have to go and sit into that. So, but at least this has taught me the path to innovations, the path to understanding how to fast track it. And we have about 1,000 patients speaking with this now. And hopefully in the coming years, now Government of India has told me to take it to 188 countries. So we are moving forward slow by slow, step by step, but I'm sure we're going to reach the estimated time period for innovations we studied from bench to bedside is 17 years. The only hope was COVID, because COVID created a hyperloop in innovations. Vaccines was 1 year. So we have hope in the coming years to see innovations come faster to light. But I've got 6 years completed, so another 11 years to go. And I'm hoping that this time it's a long process. Thank you.
Thank you.